Evening, everybody. As usual, I'd like to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. Help us spread the word on this. I'd like for you to continue my friends in Haiti or Haiti in general in your prayers. There's a lot going on there. There is going to be a link at the bottom here in the discussion. The orphanage that I was talking about, do have a link on there that has a little bit of information about them, some photographs. It does have a link, so if you feel like donating, you can do the donations there. They're really going through a lot, and he's taking care of a lot of kids. He got his family here to the United States, and he went back to take care of those kids. So keep them in your prayers. If nothing else, send them a few dollars if you can. Now, as we're doing these studies, I do use a lot of American reference, and I know that many of you are not from the United States, but I do that partially because as an American, that's what I understand. Although I do try to branch out and bring the rest of the world into this because a lot of the rest of the world is important on this. However, since the United States is most likely the daughter of Babylon, as of right now, is the only nation that fits all the criteria, that could change. I think that it's central to what we're looking at in relation to end times prophecies. Now, if there's an American reference that you don't understand, ask a question in the comments and I'll try to answer it. Or if you are in the United States and I use a Southernism that you don't understand, ask that and I'll answer that. I always try to answer questions and comments, although sometimes I do run out of time. If I'm misanswering your question or comments, I do apologize. It's not because I don't care, I just don't have enough time to do it. Now, this evening, we're going to begin looking at something that's in current events. We're going to look at it deeply later, but not at this point because the Holy Spirit's led me to look at the return of the false gods, which is where we're in the middle of right now. And we're looking at deception. However, this event is important to end times events. So I want you to be aware of what's going on. I want you to read and study Psalm 83 this week. This is not the focus of our study tonight, like I said, but what we're going to look at briefly, it's going to be the first 5.5 verses. Psalm 83, actually, first 6.5 verses. Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace. Don't ignore us. And be not still, be not inactive, O God, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult. And they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They're proud, they're hostile. They've taken crafty counsel. They plot against your people, and they consulted against your hidden ones, the ones that you cherish. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance, for they have consulted together with one consent. They're confederate against thee, they're unified and allied against you, and the tabernacles or the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites. And this begins a list of those who are going to go up against Israel. Now, this prophecy has yet to be fulfilled, but it does happen before the rest of the end time events kick off. They've attempted to make this happen in the past, but every time it was short a tribe or two. Prophetically, the tribe can refer to either the territory or the descendants of that person. Generally, it's referring to the area, but not always. But in this case, Edom can be either the land of Edom or it can be the descendants of Edom. Generally, it's going to be the territory, but it's going to be the Edomites who don't live in their territory as well. Now, the land of Moab and Ammon, which is two of the tribes here also, that land is currently controlled by Hashemite, and that's not changed recently. But I want you to notice here that it says that the tents of Edom. Who are the modern day Edomites? You may have heard them in the news. They're the so called Palestinians. And where do they live? They live in tents, they're mobile. Recently, the dictator Bashar al Assad was deposed in Syria. Who replaced him? An Edomite, a terrorist. They're on the border of Israel and Jordan. And for the time being, Jordan is at peace with Israel mostly. However, they have a problem that is similar to Israel's in that they're overrun with Palestinians. So that it may just be a matter of time, of a short time, before that situation changes. However, the tents of Edom are now in control of a powerful army on the border of Israel, and the Ishmaelites are the Arabs, and most of them don't live in tents. However, some do. So another piece of this puzzle has fallen into place. So the time's growing short. Just keep an eye on this situation. Read Psalm 83 this week. Now, the Bible contains types. We've looked at some of the types. Biblically, Edom is a type of the world. Edom, both in reality and in type, is given dire warnings, and they have prophecy surrounding them about future events. And unless the Lord returns before we get to it, we're going to look at that situation and the warnings that are given to Edom and the warnings that are given in type are given to us, the world, the rest of the world. We're going to take a look at these things, and I want you to, as you study them, hold them in your heart and hold them in your mind and be aware of what's going on when you see these events unfold around you. Now, in Luke chapter 21, verse 8, this is out of the NET Bible, he said, "Watch out that you're not misled. For many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is near. Don't follow them." In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 through 10, "Know you not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves of mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God." Last week, we started looking at these warnings against deception, and we're warned repeatedly, don't be deceived. Well, how do we prevent deception? By study. We make ourselves familiar with scriptures, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to be deceived. When you think of worship, what comes to mind? Most of the time is going to be the Sunday morning service. You have singing, may have waving your hands, commemorating the Last Supper, passing the collection plate, praying, preaching, and other things, right? Many people think of study as preparation for worship, but we should be looking at study itself as worship. The Bible presents study as the highest form of worship. Study is the only reliable way in which God can speak to us directly. Anything else is potentially based upon subjective experiences, and that can lead us into great error, and in many cases, we can be deceived. If you attend a worship service that doesn't study, that preacher is not doing what he ought to be doing. If you only receive a watered down message so that you can go home and feel good wallowing in your sin, there's a problem. If you're deceived, do you think there's a problem? If you're deceived, you think everything's fine. Now, we looked at some of the common so-called sermons that are filling churches today, comparing it to 60s TV shows or favorite cartoon characters, or taking a 3-minute object lesson and turning it into a 30-minute sermon, or even worse things. We looked at some that were pretty appalling. But the word worship itself has to do with high respect, honor, dignity, glory, and worthiness. If you truly worship God, you will want to know what he has to say, and we know that through study. Study is the highest form of worship. Be not deceived. That's the warning repeatedly. When we pray, we speak to God. When we study, God speaks to us. When we rely upon subjective experiences, then we fail. And there are many ways that we can fail. We've looked at several of them, and we're going to look at some more. Last week we looked at some of the so-called innocent children's toys that had their roots in the occult. And what happens when you mix the occult with the worship of the one true God? It's an abomination, and it's a desecration. Now, a desecration is a sacrilegious treatment. It's an act of diverting from a hallowed purpose or use. This is noted as early as 1717, which comes from desecrate. And desecrate means to divest of sacred character or treat with sacrilege. That's known as early as the 1670s. It is from the prefix de, which means do the opposite of, and consecrate. In other words, you were to undo consecration. Consecrate itself is from the 14th century, and it means to make or declare sacred by certain ceremonies or rites, to make holy or devote. So when we create a desecration by mixing evil in with the holy, that's a form of lawlessness. We're warned against lawlessness. You can ask any of my Haitian friends about voodoo, which is technically pagan worship of an African deity. However, the way that it's openly and widely practiced in Haiti and can be found in New Orleans and most of the Southeast United States as a mixture of the pagan occult practices mixed with Catholicism. It's a complete desecration, any way you look at it. When you hear stories in the United States about the Haitians that are killing and eating pets and generally practicing lawlessness, it's not because they're Haitian, but because they practice voodoo. The dark powers behind the government, they're not going to say that because they want to create racial divisions and promote every false religion and destroy Christianity. The problem is not that these people are from Haiti. What does that do to those who are from Haiti and are Christian? They're persecuted as well because they're all lumped in together, even though they don't practice this false religion. However, we do know from examples from the Bible, and we're warned about this, that the righteous may fall under judgment because the nation itself is unrighteous. So, what happens when a nation that was once a Christian nation desecrates that Christianity? That nation is going to fall. That nation will be deceived by false gods. Most people who do these things are not actively evil. Most people who practice and spread these evil behaviors that seem innocent are themselves deceived. Obviously, some of them are evil, but most of them are simply deceived. How are they deceived? John chapter 15, verses 18 through 19. If the world hate you, you need to be aware that it hated me before you. If you were of the world would love his own. But because you're not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. This word that is translated as world is the word cosmos. Now, we have come to use this word to mean everything in the universe, but can the universe hate? The universe has no feelings. Does a rock hate you? No. But this word conveys the idea as system, and it's used to represent the people, the government system, the citizens, the people. That's the world when it's translated from this world. And the people can most certainly hate you. Now, the word for hate here is the word meseo, which seems to be older than the Greek language itself, that the Greeks brought it in. And it's the first part of the word misogynist, which means somebody who hates women. Now, Jesus tells us that the world will hate faithful believers because the world hates God and the world hates Jesus. And since the church is the bride of Christ, I guess that kind of means that the world is misogynist, but the world does hate God and hates Jesus and will hate you if you're faithful. This passage says that the world loves his own. And a common theme that I've seen in many churches today is a mission statement that says, we can outlove the world. Have you ever seen that? I've seen it in multiple places. They're saying that they can love the world more than the world can love them. And ironically, the word outlove has come to be used as a code word for showing approval of homosexual unions. Although that's not directly the context of the saying that we can outlove the world, I do think it's applicable because they often apply it to the same people. Now, 1 John 2:15 commands us to not love the world, but that message doesn't fill the pews. We can outlove the world sounds great to get people in the doors, but we're not to invite the world into the church. That is what evangelism is for, going out there, preaching to people, getting them to accept the Lord Jesus Christ, and then coming into the church itself, because the church is there to feed the flock and to bless the brethren. And if the people in the world loves its own, it's impossible to outlove the world without becoming one of the world. And while we may be in the world, we are not to be of the world. Just to repeat the previous verse, is that the world hates you. You know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love his own, but because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Now, there's a logic rule that is used by philosophers called modus ponendo ponens, which means a mode that by affirming affirms. And it simply means that if P implies Q and P is true, then Q must also be true. And then there is modus tollens. On the other hand, it's a rule that's based upon the first one. It simply states that if P implies Q, then not Q implies not P. And don't think for a moment that the writers of the New Testament were unfamiliar with philosophical arguments. We, as a society, may be ignorant of them, but they were not. And Jesus is using the concept of modus tollens in this passage. P, if you follow Jesus, follows Q, then the world hates you. For right now, assume that the opposite of hate is love. The world is referring to the people in the world. So modus ponens, which is the first one, says, if you follow Jesus and the world hates you. Modus tollens says, if the world doesn't hate you, then you don't follow Jesus. What Jesus is stating is simply, if the world loves you, you don't follow me. Should we try to get the world to love us? Should we tell the truth? Should we try to love the world? Should we try to outlove the world? Theological deception is more dangerous than deception by the world, and that's why we need to study so that we can be aware. And think about it. If some red guy with horns and a forked tail and holding a pitchfork showed up and wanted to make a deal, even most non-Christians would know enough to avoid that deal. But if someone who appears as a beacon of light gives you good-sounding words and wants to make a deal, how do you know the truth? So what other kinds of deception should we be on the lookout for? Well, now, we're going to get back to worldly deception, such as movies and TV ads shortly, but for right now, I want to look at an example that you might be exposed to within the church. And you're going to have to pay attention here to follow what's being said. Sometimes the lies are very subtle, but they have great impact. Sometimes the person who is lying, that is, that they know what they're doing, but most often they don't know that they're lying. They do so out of ignorance. Now, have you heard, or perhaps you've even said yourself, that God can't lie? I've said that. It's a true statement because God can't lie. 2 Thessalonians 2:11, and for this cause God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie. In this verse, there's a definite article. It's not a lie, it is the lie, and the lie has been previously defined. The word lie is a falsehood. Now, there are two perceptions that are in conflict. Therefore, one of them is the truth and one of them is a lie, or they can both be lies, I guess, technically. In both Greek and Hebrew, the words for truth have to do with reality and not simply logic or opinion. And remember, we looked at the truth before. You have the reality truth, which is what is. We have the logical truth, which we can use to try to figure out what is. And then we have opinion truth, which is what it sounds like. It's your opinion. Sometimes the opinion is all you have, but more often than not, that's what you want. The word that's translated as lie in this verse is the word pseudos, which is the source of the English word and prefix pseudo, which means false. Malcolm Muggeridge once said that people don't believe lies because they have to, but because they want to. And numerous studies have proved his opinion to be correct. People prefer lies to the truth. And for this cause shall God send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie. This word that's translated as strong here is from the word energia, and it's where we get our English word energy, and it has to do with an actuality. In other words, this strong delusion is an actual wandering or an actual error. It's an operation of deception that is sent into the belief so that those who are being spoken about will believe this falsehood. It is sent into their faith. Now, there are many opinions about what the lie is. One of those theories, or one of those beliefs, is the theory of evolution. Now, using science, you can either prove the Bible true or false. However, DNA is coded information, and if you try to get coded information from random chance, that you can prove with a probability approaching 1.0 that there must be a creator outside of time and space. You can also prove with a probability approaching 0.0 that the theory of natural evolution can't be true. Also, proving that evolution is false doesn't prove that the Bible is true. Neither does proving a creator outside of time and space prove that the Bible is true. Now, you can prove the Bible is true with a probability approaching 1, but that does require additional logic and reasoning, which is fascinating, but it's not something that we're concerned with at this exact moment in time. Titus chapter 2, Verse 2, in hope of Ionian life, which God that cannot lie promised before the world began, before times Ionian. This is not the word cosmos. When it says world here, this is Ionian times. This is the ages. Hebrews 6:18, that by two immutable things in which it was impossible for God to lie, we might have a strong delusion, who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope that is set before us. And then back to this verse again, 2 Thessalonians 2:11. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie. Does Jesus lie? Nope. How about God? Nope. We're going to come back to this though. In Matthew 22:14, for many are called, but few are chosen. Now, this phrase right here is where the idea for the TV show The Chosen comes from. The word for chosen is eklektos, from which we get the English word eclectic and election, as in someone is chosen. It's from two words, ek, which means out of, like Exodus, the way out, and lego, which has to do with order, to arrange, to choose, and then some other various shades of meaning on there. We get our word legacy from that, what people will say about you. So it says, many are called, but few are chosen. Those who are chosen are from among those who are called. Only those who are saved. That this is a common salvation within the family. Only these have the opportunity to be elect. God does not choose people to be born from above, but he chooses from among those who are in the family, those who are elect or called out from among the called. Now, the word for called is part of the word for church, those who are called out. The Texas Receptus sometimes adds these words, for many are called, but few are chosen, to verses that talk about first and last, and it doesn't belong there and just simply confuses some issues. God is not the author of confusion. So, issues of inerrancy and infallibility have to do with truth and lies, or with falsehoods. Our modern ideas of inerrancy and infallibility of the scriptures were originated by John Nelson Darby and Cyrus Schofield. These are both faithful believers by all appearances, from what I know, although Darby is considered the father of modern sensationalism. But the word inerrant itself means without error, and infallible means not capable of error. And some people use these words interchangeable, but they're not really interchangeable. Now, you can't know that something is without error or incapable of error. Therefore, the ideas are assumptions, and assumptions can be easily misused. Now, there's no way to find errors in the Bible unless you know what it's supposed to say, and only God knows that for certain. However, the Bible does contain error correcting code, and error correcting code can be used to detect and correct errors within reason. Fault tolerance is simply redundancy. Basically, it's a majority vote. If you have multiple manuscripts and most of them say one thing, you assume that that's true unless you have some other reason to believe otherwise. Now, there are some more advanced methods that people who know a lot more than I do know about, but that's a basic idea. Redundancy can be used to detect and correct discrepancies, and we use them on a daily basis in UPCs, barcodes, ISBN numbers, credit card numbers, parity. Accountants use casting out nines. The space program uses 4 redundant computers with 1 backup that cross-checks 500 times per second. The rules for the Masoretes used for copying the Hebrew text was redundancy. And perhaps you've heard that 2 reliable witnesses are required for verifying something. The Bible gives us that. That's redundancy. Redundancy and fault tolerance, these are the basis for error correcting code that the Bible uses to convey information. Now, we looked briefly a few weeks back at the idea of cognitive dissonance, which is simply having 2 conflicting perceptions, one of which is reality and one is not. Even reality itself is a perception because you can't know reality exactly, and your perceptions may both be wrong. If a crime is committed and police interview 3 witnesses, They may all three have seen something different, and they're not lying. It's just their perception is different. But confusion is created when you're forced to accept conflicting viewpoints, such as gender dysphoria, things like that. In reality, the perception that is discarded is categorized as a lie. And if you can't discard one, psychological issues arise, which we've already looked at. When we read the Bible, if we treat it as a logical system without understanding the logic, without understanding the error correcting codes, the fault tolerant systems, and things like that, then we can create cognitive dissonance in our spiritual lives. Have you ever met somebody who holds a belief so strongly that they reject anything that may contradict that belief? That can create a problem. They may be correct, but the inability to inspect the belief leaves somebody open for deception. Now, these deceptions could be brought in through politics, either governmental or church politics, using questionable statements that are inserted into the accepted canon of the Bible, or rejecting statements that are outside of the official canon, such as when Jesus quotes directly from books such as Enoch and is rejected because the canon doesn't approve that book. Jesus quoted it, but we can't. Now, if you can get everybody to accept as true all statements in the canon, either voluntarily or through force, we do know that history showed that people were forced to accept these things, even if they were opposed to them, then you can get them to take oaths to that effect. Matthew 5:33 through 37. Again, you've heard it hath been said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Do you see people swearing an oath to denominations? Now, I don't mean they say, now, have you believed and been baptized to join a local congregation, but an oath that you agree with that denomination. If you can get people to swear an oath to accept the canon, what happens if that canon is incorrect? What happens if it's corrupted? Say they add or they omit something. What happens if you can convince people that an attack on any part of the Bible is not true, makes the entire Bible not true, and therefore it's an attack which must be defended at all costs? This is common among certain groups, especially King James onlyists, but there are others. It's not an attack. It is trying to come to an understanding. These people can be deceived when they swear these oaths, when they swear their allegiance to something other than God. They can be deceived, and they can deceive others, and they may do it maliciously or they may do it ignorantly. Now, very subtle translation effects can be used to change what is being said in the Bible, or evolving language in English, or using invalid reasoning methods or interpretations, all because of an oath of loyalty that is misplaced. Philippians 3:14. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. This is talking about a prize, not a gift. It's speaking of having a goal in mind. We are to strive for the prize. This is about our works and what they should be. And if we're deceived, we will be striving for the wrong prize. And the biggest danger for believers often comes from within the professing church. So how do you know if you're aiming or striving for the correct target? This whole verse is competition language. I mean, it has to do with work, striving for the best. If you've accepted a false goal and you've rejected the true goal, everything you do is going to be in vain. You must pursue the correct prize. And this word pursue is the same word that's translated as persecute. We have to remain diligent in our pursuit of the prize. If you're heading the wrong way, which would be observed behavior, what's going on now, then you have to change to the right way, which is desired behavior. And you can only know the difference if you're prepared and if you're not deceived. You must change the errors of your ways. And the change requires that you stop the old behavior and then begin the correct behavior. It's a two-step process. You must know what is wrong in order to go the right way, but you must know the right way in order to recognize that you're on the wrong way. They go together. Change the error of your ways. Do not be deceived. Numbers 32:23, the second part, and be sure that your sin will find you out. The Septuagint words it, and you shall know your sin when afflictions shall come upon you. This is a culmination of an admonition and a warning that was given to Israel about faithfulness in conquering the land. But in type, it is appropriate for all who want to be faithful believers today. If you're not faithful, then bad things are going to happen. Not bad things in the eyes of men, but reprehensible things in the eyes of God. And even when two people have different perceptions of the same thing, they can both be true in some sense. So the idea of inerrancy is easily misused. Say, for example, you get an email message, the Bible, that claims to be from your boss. And well, then this is God. You know, the Chinese word for God is the big boss in the sky. So we've got the Bible, claims to be from God. You get an email from your boss, and you find some spelling and grammar errors, but you can understand the message. If you demand inerrancy from your perspective, you might think that the boss made a mistake, so then you can ignore the entire message. Or you might think that somebody must have changed the message, but the original was inerrant, but you can ignore this one. This only matters to the extent that the message can be correctly understood. An authentication code would be included telling you things that only the boss knows, things that only God knows. Textual criticism is important, but doing what the message actually says to do is more important. You might have to decode the message in order to understand the message correctly, but once you understand the message, do what the message commands. A failure to understand this concept will make it easy to be deceived by others when the message is misapplied. Now, understanding the different reasoning methods is a key to interpreting God's message. And we've looked at this chart briefly before, but here it is, just to remind you. And you have deductive reasoning, which is top-down logic, inductive reasoning, which is bottom-up using reality, and then you have abductive, which is inside-out using opinion. And if you use abductive reasoning, then opinions can be used even when those opinions don't fit logic or reality. We looked at this with cults. We looked at this with false Christian sects. This is the prosperity gospel. The new age is being slipped into the Christian message, new light, and things such as that. I was recently shown a clip from a very popular prosperity gospel preacher, had a large local congregation and millions of online followers. He created biblical sounding phrases to go along with biblical phrases, just out of thin air, just made them up. They sounded as if they belonged, but they were opinion. They were very popular opinion, and they're very deceptive. Exodus 20:16, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Were you ever told that this means not to lie to or against your neighbor? That's what I understood it to mean when I was growing up. But is that what it really says? The NET says you shall not give or you shall not answer false testimony against your neighbor. This is what it means. It literally means to not bear false witness. Don't give false testimony against your neighbor. And the word give is answer, and this is a legal term. This is speaking against perjury, not just lying. It does have broader applications, but the wording is specific about perjuring yourself with false testimony against your neighbor. Rumors? This word witness here is from the word martys, from where we get the English word martyr. In English, we have narrowed the meaning in modern usage because there were so many witnesses for Jesus who were persecuted or killed because of their testimonies. When the time comes, will you bear a true or will you bear a false witness of the world? I was given this baptism from a church in Southeast Asia, This is kind of some tough questions, and this is the kind of environment they're in. It's not the kind of environment that I'm in right now, perhaps not you. But are you willing to leave the home and lose the blessing of your father or your family? Are you willing to lose your job? If you get baptized, you could lose your job. Soviet Union would kill people who got baptized. They would kill the ones doing the baptizing, but they would torture them for days and days before they killed them because they found this so offensive. Are you willing to give an offering to the Lord? Well, there it is, asking for the money. Are you willing to be beaten rather than deny your faith? Are you willing to go to prison? Are you willing to die for Jesus? It's tough questions. Back to Titus 1:2. In the hope of Ionian life, which God that cannot lie promised before the world began. Now we saw that the word false is pseudo. In this verse, where it says cannot lie, is the word apseudos. This means not false. And the Greek, when you put the prefix "a" in front of it, it negates the word. So in this case, it's the opposite of false. And in many parts of Greece, and probably marketing and advertising, being good at lying and deceiving is considered a virtue. This has always been true of human nature in any zero-sum game such as warfare. Even God approved the deception in certain circumstances, such as when the member of the divine council said he would put a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets of Ahab, and God said, go do it. But see this word hope? When I was in Bible college, I was taught that hope meant assurance. I knew better, but that's what they taught. Hope means assurance. Oh, hope means that you're assured of something. Well, I can assure you that hope does not mean assurance. A hope is a well founded expectation that is based upon certain assumptions. I hope to achieve the prize is based upon being successfully obedient and faithful. In Acts 24, verses 25 through 26, I had this little story of Felix. And as he reasoned in righteousness, temperance, and judgment to come, Felix trembled and answered, talking to Paul here, go thy way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I will call for thee. He hoped also that money should have been given him of Paul that he might loose him. Wherefore he sent for him the oftener and communed with him. So Felix had a reasonable expectation that Paul would pay him to free him, but that hope was not realized. I don't know if I were in prison, I could pay a few dollars to be set free. I might be tempted to do it, but Paul felt that he was where he was supposed to be. Felix hoped for money, he didn't get it. In Titus 1:2, Paul says there's a hope of this Ionian life, and that hope may not be realized. And this has to do with ruling and reigning in the coming kingdom, not with our common salvation. Psalm 116:11 from the Septuagint. And I said in mine amazement, every man is a liar, every man is pseudos. In secular usage, Aristotle, in his writings on sophistic refutation, said to take a single point of comparison, it is a task of the man who has knowledge of a particular subject himself to refrain from fallacious, pseudos arguments about the subjects of his knowledge and to be able to expose him who uses them. In other words, he's saying don't use arguments that are not entirely true. Don't speak falsely just in order to win an argument. In this verse, the phrase cannot lie is that of being without falsehood. This is the same thing as true. In other words, God is without falsehood, not God cannot lie. And just a few verses later, in Titus chapter 1, verse 12, one of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, the Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, slow bellies. That means they're lazy gluttons. This is an interesting statement of the Epimenides paradox by Paul. The Epimenides paradox shows a problem with self-reference in logic because Epimenides himself was a Cretan. Therefore, if all Cretans are liars, then he's a liar. And if he's a liar, then all Cretans are not liars. This is similar to the Russell paradox, which simply states, I'm lying. Well, if I'm lying, then that's a true statement. But if it's a true statement, then I'm not lying. It's a deceptive argument. And this whole idea in verse 12 is an interesting study. But in this verse, it is liars. This is not, they're not deceptive. These are liars. And so they translated it correctly in this verse, and then they back translated it in verse 2 as liar, even though that's not what it says. God is without falsehood. The truth can be used to deceive. Demons will not lie when the truth will work. And not only does God not lie, it's more complete than that. God does not deceive. Who does lie? The father of lies, the Lord of the drain flies that we looked at a few weeks back. 1 John 2:21, I have not written unto you because you know not the truth, but because you know it, and that no lie is of the truth. A lie is that which is not of the truth. Then verses 22 and 23, who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist, that denieth the Father and the Son. Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not even the Father. But he that acknowledgeth the Son have the Father also. In English, we tend to use the prefix anti to mean against. Like, I am anti whatever, I'm against it. In Greek, the prefix anti means in place of. In other words, he is against the Christ, but more importantly, he wants to be in place of Christ. And the word for deny is the Greek word arniumai, and it's a play on words with birds. Matthew 10:33. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. This word for deny is used only in this one passage by Jesus. It's used elsewhere in the Gospels, but this is the only place by Jesus. Is arnicita. The word for bird is ornicita. Ornicita. Similar. So if you remember back to our study on the birds, and I'm going to rework the study on the birds and expand it in the near future, but the birds are those who want to rule over others. It can be the secular government, but in the Bible, it is generally specifically used for church government. They want to be the bosses. They want to look pretty. They want to preen their feathers, but without producing anything. They just want to consume. So whoever denies or whoever birds me before men, I will deny. I will bird him before my Father in heaven. Who's in charge? You? Someone else? Or is it Jesus? Jesus is the one who should be in charge. So who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son. Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not even the Father, but he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also. They may not be specifically against Christ, but they want to be in place of Christ. There are many antichrists, but there will be one, the Antichrist. The United States was once a godly nation. Not perfect, but that was our intent. The U.S. Military Academy at West Point has a motto that says duty, honor, and country. I understand they've changed it. They dropped the whole duty, honor, and country thing, but at one time this was important. Part of their cadet prayer says, make us choose a harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole truth can be won. And the West Point Honor Code states that a cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do. And those who violate this code are expelled from the academy. They were held to high standards. As Christians, should we not hold ourselves to those same high standards? If we do hold ourselves to those standards, then we won't be deceived. We can take the easy way out. We can have the fire insurance. But if we want to receive the prize, we must choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong or the half-truth. Do we do that? Are we prepared to do that? The Bible promises that if we're faithful, we will be persecuted. And we see that persecution taking place today, to a lesser degree in the United States and in other places, but the persecution is still there and is growing. The apostasy is now almost fully realized. The God of self is primary, and behind that is the deceiver who we've been looking at. And I hope you've stayed with me up until this point, because these are some things that we need to use in our arsenal of preparation. But before we close tonight, I want us to pick up where we were at last week and look at a few more things along the lines of current events. Last week, we started looking at some advertising that promoted some occultic products. My wife asked me how we could boycott all the retailers. I really don't think that it's practical nor expected to boycott every retailer. Perhaps if they go all in on the demonic, but overall, a retailer simply buys a product that somebody wants and then they resell it. There may be certain instances that you might want to consider boycotting a retailer. For example, a certain big box retailer that I will not name due to possible copyright infringements, but they have large red circles on a white background as their emblem. When they started allowing men to use the women's restroom, and then they made it a big deal to put out and sell all of their rainbow and transgender stuff. I mean, they had the whole big displays going. Perhaps they should be avoided. However, the individual products should obviously be avoided. Companies that promote these things, shun them. So we're going to look at some openly blasphemous advertising in a moment. However, before we get to the advertising, there is some excitement around the fact that Disney has now introduced their first openly Christian character. Now, I know that there's a lot that can be said about Disney movies. In my opinion, the older movies were simply trying to tell stories and not trying to be anti-Christian or deceptive. They probably didn't succeed in that. But you can even make the argument that the real Snow White, not the outrageous remake that was recently released, had Christian overtones. And if you're interested, drop me a message and I'll try to add that explanation either in the messages or in the next week's study. I do know that Walt Disney himself is of the possible satanic bloodlines, and as a teenager, he did belong to a De Molay chapter, but as far as is known, he never joined a Freemason lodge as an adult. And for those who are new here, most Freemasons are well-intentioned people who are simply deceived, and they're not openly evil. But as far as Disney movies go, we're going to look at some specifics in the future. We've already looked at Peter Pan, but a friend of mine's daughter was deceived by a charlatan who came to their house. He's a preacher, and he huffed and he puffed and he got all red in the face, and he pointed at their video cabinet and he said, "God has told me that there is demonic material in there." Well, he was talking about Disney movies, and my friend's daughter has small children, and anybody can guess that they probably had Disney movies. I could go to a stranger's house, and if they have kids, if I guess that they had Disney movies, I'd be right 90% of the time. Now, this is not to defend Disney movies, but rather to expose a charlatan, a deceiver who claimed to be a Christian, and he may be a Christian. Many Christians are themselves deceived. But this new Disney program, this new TV show, has Disney's first openly Christian character. They've had plenty of openly homosexual and transgender characters, but never a Christian character. And since I no longer have small children and I prefer not to expose my grandkids to Disney without previewing them, I've never seen it. But I read about it and I thought, well, that's interesting. Now, I admit I was suspicious, but I didn't review it at the time. Well, why was I suspicious? When was the last time that the Disney company was interested in Jesus? They have been openly anti-Christian. They ruined the Star Wars franchise by making it unbelievably woke to the point that the wokeness became the story. They have plenty of witchcraft, plenty of sorcery. It's all presented in a positive light. And then they have the new tolerance of deviancy, but no Christian. Turns out this show is a bait and switch. The bait is, look, a Christian character. This show is called Win or Lose, and it gets an 8.0 rating, which is very high. However, calling something light doesn't mean that it is light. Satan will transform into an angel of light in order to deceive people. This is not to deceive unbelievers, they're already deceived. And this is not going to deceive those who are firmly rooted in the truth, but for those who are nominal Christians, and I really dislike that term, but it conveys the idea. These are people who have truly believed, but they've either not had time or they've not put in their effort for study and to grow. But the nominal Christians are the targets. Prevent them from becoming mature believers. This show targets children, it's always the children, and far too many parents will say, oh, it's Disney. It must be okay because it's for children. This is not Jesus with some Baal worship mixed in. It is Baal worship with some Jesus mixed in. In the first episode, Ave Maria is playing in the background to give it a Christian overtone, and the main character is praying for strength and that she will not do that thing again, whatever that thing is and not said. Her father coaches the baseball team, and she wants to make her father proud, but she always falls short. When she comes up to bat, she makes a cross on home plate. And then when she fails again, her father won't give her a high five. And then we see a little cloud growing on her shoulder that is like anxiety. And that grows on her shoulder, and no matter what she does, she can't get rid of it. And this is something we can all relate to. Pretty good so far. It's a good Christian episode. Then we hear some more Christian music. She's sitting with the sun in her face, and in come the tarot cards. Her mother is reading her fortune and pulls up a tarot card that says sacrifice, which is an actual tarot card. I looked it up. It's a real card. And she is told that they're going to the state championship. This is good luck. Of course, this is going to be a positive message coming from something demonic. And you might know how to turn it off about then as a mature believer, but most people will not. And the kids get that message about the occult that it's wonderful. We talk about planting churches. Well, guess what? Satan plants a seed also. It's a seed of witchcraft, a seed of the demonic, a seed of the new age that will grow into a church of the birds. It will be a monstrosity. Might be pretty to look at, but the fruit will be rotten. Matthew chapter 15, verses 12 through 13. Then came his disciples and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard this saying? But he answered and said, Every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be rooted up. These are the deceptions that we as believers are at war with. And if we're not prepared, we will lose. And if you are not aware that you're at war, or if you choose not to participate in that war, you've already lost. Satan always targets the children and weak adults. Have you noticed that we now have a society of weak adults? They never leave the nest. They're forever babes. And our modern churches are producing entire congregations of baby Christians who never mature and never grow up. Hey, over there, we've got a Christian episode. Come and watch. Better yet, let your kids watch without you. And we can be the babysitter. You can go do something else. Well, this episode involves her mother pushing magic jewelry on her for good luck, but at least the kid refuses that. Of course, her reason for refusing it was, I don't need your rocks because I rock. Self-esteem instead of a Christian-based answer, but at least she refused the magic jewelry. Then her father sees that she's weighted down and tells her that she needs to have fun, and she prays for strength and walks up to home place with a really odd statement about having faith, so it ends on a basically positive note. I think this is one of the fruits of the cult of evangelism. And what do I mean by the cult of evangelism? Ephesians 4, verses 11 through 12, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastor teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. Some are evangelists. Some. Some are apostles, some are prophets, some are evangelists, and some are pastor teachers. A pastor must teach. He's not a cheerleader. A man who can't teach is not fit to be a pastor. A prophet must dig and expound a little deeper. And an evangelist is what we would call a missionary today. Well, the cult of evangelism is a teaching of so many congregations that their primary role is to go out and knock on doors or preach on street corners or do whatever it takes to get more unsaved people into the church building. Then those people are left to starve. No one to feed the flock. They may be fleeced, but they're not fed. Whenever it's financially beneficial to be seen as a Christian, we'll have a national revival. It's a false revival, but we'll have one. We have one now. Pop stars, movie stars, the entire entertainment industry, they become Christian. Now, there are truly Christian people in these industries, and some studies have a or some movie studios have a Christian objective, but we're not talking about these. We're talking about the largest number of them, the ones that are jumping on the bandwagon. They may have good intentions, but millions are deceived. Sometimes we see changed lives. Mostly we see their eyes light up with dollar signs. How can we get support? So in this show that we're just talking about, before they decided to add this Christian character, they had a different story. Originally, she was supposed to be transgender, and they were going with their normal agenda, but then they decided to make her Christian. They needed to fix the bottom line for the profit. Christians really didn't win one here. All we got was a transfer from an openly transgender demonic message to a subtle demonic message using a good person as a means of delivering that message. Be not deceived. When the openly demonic doesn't work, they're going to sweeten it with sugar. To quote Mary Poppins, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in a most delightful way, or the poison. It may start out as a so-called Christian episode, but don't worry, by the 8th episode, Frankie Poo is saved by his homosexual lover. It's poison. And remember, rat poison is mostly nutritious. It is 99.9% nutritious. Is that 0.1%? That'll kill you. And things such as this show, this is a spoonful of sugar that Satan uses to get you to swallow that poison. Be not deceived. Study, be prepared. When you're blinded by a false light, be prepared to see what is being hidden from you. Sometimes you have to look hard, sometimes it's pretty blatant. We're going to close tonight with a couple of blatantly blasphemous commercials. You may be like me, I don't really watch a lot of TV. Mostly people send me clips that they think I need to see, or I see them randomly. One of the Christian organizations that rates TV shows realized a few years ago that they should be rating the commercials. Depending on what country you're in, you may not get commercials. In the United States, advertisers pay for shows to try to get the audience to buy their products. I prefer that to having the government determine what can and can't be made, but it does have its problems as well. But this Christian organization discovered that the most family-friendly shows had the most atrocious advertising. And I will warn you that these examples are pretty bad. I want you to see what our culture is being inundated with. I'm not going to show you the first two. They're kind of long. I don't want to break the copyright rules and get this banned. I posted links to these at the bottom. But the first one is an ad about a chicken. Part one shows the entire community doing a chicken dance, which is a little bit weird, but okay so far. And then they find what they can believe in, chicken. And the chicken is like an idol on the dais. They have him up on the high point. They're worshiping the chicken. Then you get part two, the second advertising. It's all hell gravy. And the guy's walking in the woods. Then he encounters a chicken. And then the chicken turns into a weird person. Then more people come out of the trees. They start walking. They're carrying a giant egg, which they drop. Then they pick it up so that the first two can pass under it. And then they arrive at a lake made of gravy. They're all giving you very cult-like vibes here. The first guy is then picked up and baptized in the gravy, and then he comes up a piece of chicken. And then this ends with believe in chicken again. And links are below. Watch at your own peril. They're very creepy, but I don't want you to think that I'm making this up or exaggerating it. Now, the last one that I'm going to play, I'm going to play the first 30 seconds of it. I have a link to the entire thing, but I don't want to get flagged for copyright violations, so we're going to watch the first 30 seconds or so.
God.
Well, so you're probably wondering why I called you here. As you know, in the beginning, I created heaven and earth, but then you guys got pretty good at making stuff too. I mean, man, who's got two thumbs and mutual respect for humanity? This deity. So Papa's popping out to take it all in. Oh, my.
Come on, people. You're amazing. You are all powerful.
I'm glad she knows me.
Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And one last thing tonight, and I know that I said the advertising was the last, but this is important with current events. And besides, I promised somebody that we would cover this tonight, and I almost forgot. I'm sure that you're all aware of the recent Blue Origin flight that had all female passengers. It was a rocket that shot some women up into low Earth orbit, and a big deal was made about it on all the media. Now, if you watch everything surrounding this, it's easy to make fun of it. It's ridiculous. There's even some good evidence that it was faked. However, I don't think it was faked. And that's because there is so much about this that is it's just evil. On the surface, it really is kind of funny if you don't look into it deeply. Katy Perry, who started out as a Christian singer, later admitted that she sold her soul to the devil. Link to this below, her admitting that. What's going on here with this launch? Why does this look fake, and why is it subject to such open mockery? Well, the root of this fiasco is feminism. Now, these women did nothing but go along for the ride, but it was important that the entire world know that it was the first all-female crew. They were not truly astronauts. They had no control of the vehicle. They were merely passengers, but it's the first time that it's all females that have gone up. Modern feminism, which is not true feminism, but modern feminism is the root of what's wrong with the world right now. It's not about being treated equally. It's about destroying masculinity among men, but making women masculine. This is an anti-God movement. It is anti-family, and it is pro-abortion, pro-child sacrifice. We looked at some of the satanic imagery around NASA, and we looked at some of the satanic things that used to be hidden but are now in the open. But sometimes things can be hidden right in front of you. Sometimes I say that the best thing to hide something from me is to put it in plain sight right in front of my eyes. For example, why were there 6 women? Why not 5? Why not 7? Maybe a dozen. It may just be a coincidence, but I think we should always look closely at coincidences. In the Bible, the number 6 has to do with the manifestation of sin and things of Satan. The modern woke mainstream media even refers to them simply as the 6, and you're supposed to know who they're talking about. Now, if you think this is a stretch, I want you to look at something. These are in the wrong order here. I apologize about that. The first patch is on the left. That's her flight mission patch. Doesn't even look like the rocket they went up on. But do you see the one on the right? What does it look like when it's upside down? Looks like the Baphomet statue that's in the middle of it. Remember the cultic associations with NASA? As a Christian, this right here made me sit up and pay attention. Notice the female body on this? This is the Church of Satan. Katy Perry started out as a Christian singer. Her parents are traveling ministers, but she is now heavily involved in the occult and in witchcraft. People who don't think this stuff is real are blind, or they're just blind. This flight is the demonic version of evangelism, the return of the false gods, Baal, the deceiver. This is worship of Mother Earth, Gaia, and heavenly beings. She sang the song, "What a Wonderful World." Probably not an evil song in itself, but what an appropriate song for somebody to sing who worships the gods of this world, all while promoting and seizing the worship of the divine feminine. Jezebel was the high priestess for Baal, and how fitting and how appropriate that the divine feminine is committing this atrocity. The root of witchcraft right here. And so many celebrities are into the fertility goddesses and the prosperity gods, the Jezebels, the Baals. Even the shape of the rocket should point out this association, the correct shape, not the one that's on the patch. I'm not going to post it here. You can look it up if you want to. Another passenger on this flight made it a point of showing her feather necklace. A feather is spiritually significant and is linked to the Egyptian goddess Maat, who is the goddess of harmony, balance, truth, and justice. On the patch itself on the bottom, there is a scale that's also representative of Maat, the same goddess. They all took a turn ringing a bell, which is an occult ritual to invoke demons and create a sacred space. One of the crew members prayed right before ringing the bell, then walked through an archway. And remember the arch we looked at last week? And this arch said, "Light the candle." A candle is used in paganism, invoking the energy of demons. This is why we should really use oil lamps and not candles if we're going to use lighting in a service during one of our assembly meetings. The wax candles are used in pagan worship. God commanded the use of oil lamps. At least one of these passengers held a butterfly over her eye, which is an Illuminati symbol that is all over pop culture. You can search it everywhere, and just everywhere they're holding a butterfly over one eye. At one point, all these women are in a circle, they're holding hands and praying. Who do you think they're praying to? A self proclaimed witch is probably not praying to God the Father. One of them, who does claim to be a Christian, wore an $18,000 necklace for good luck that said, "Remember, the dreams you hold close are within your power to manifest." Are we supposed to manifest our dreams? This all happened during Christ's resurrection week. Why that week? April is the pagan month of fertility worship. These are people who are all for killing unborn babies, but they want to bring fertility, almost like a sacred ritual. All on a mission called New Shepard. Now, supposedly it's called New Shepard, named after Alan Shepard, the astronaut. But with all the satanic imagery, that's a hard sell for me to believe that story. Replacing the Good Shepherd with the New Shepherd during that particular week with all the pagan practices, this does not all sound like one big coincidence to me. This is all one big satanic ritual right in front of our eyes, but instead of being aware, we ridiculed them. Their intent was to draw away from the true gospel and sacrifice for the false gods, and they did that. This was not fake. This was not simply comedy gold. This was intentionally satanic. Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 8, out of the NET Bible. Don't be deceived. God will not be made a fool. For a person will reap what he sows, because a person who sows to his own flesh will reap corruption from the flesh. But the one who sows to the Spirit will reap Ionian life from the Spirit. Brothers and sisters, I want each and every one of us to reap this Ionian life from the Spirit. I want us to reach the prize of the high calling. We need to pray for each other. We need to pray for one another. Don't be deceived and be aware of what's going on.